America, we got to get back to doing what's expected of us as free citizens in this democracy. That means being tolerant, being respectful, staying informed, and being engaged. I'm former Congressman Joe Walsh. Follow me here and join the millions of Americans who are renewing their social contract with each other. The social contract, it's on us. Hey, welcome everybody. Former Congressman Joe Walsh with you this Friday, the end of a week, I believe. By the way, you saw that No Kings. There's the No Kings hashtag. Again, just one quick plea today. We don't have kings in America, right? I hope everybody listening from left to right agrees with me. And if you do agree with me that we don't have kings in America, go to that website I keep talking about, oneflaginitiative.com. All one word, oneflaginitiative.com. There it is, Keith. I changed all of my profile pictures to that No Kings hashtag. You can too. Let's all kind of embrace and rally around that basic truth. Let's start there and we'll see where it takes us. No Kings in America. Go to oneflaginitiative.org. It'll explain it all and tell you what you need to do. When the history books are written, I do believe my guest today will be duly noted as a hero in this era, in this Trumpian era. My guest today is Charlie Sykes. Where to start? I'll start like this. A long time, in I suppose another world, a long time principled conservative talk radio host in the state of Wisconsin. Many of you listening right now recognize him and know him because you see him on MSNBC. He writes for The Atlantic. He was the original editor-in-chief of that great website, The Bulwark. Charlie has one more plug, and I'll plug Charlie sufficiently during this conversation. Got a great Substack page out as well. Go check it out, charliesykes.substack.com. But I like to introduce Charlie as this, and I don't throw that term around, my friend, hero. You were and are an original NeverTrumper. People, Charlie, often talk about, oh, Joe, you gave up your radio show to say what you really believed about Trump. Well, it took me a few years to do that. Charlie Sykes did it out of the gate. Again, we talk about that word courage. You don't see a lot of it in political media and or in politics. Charlie, my friend, welcome.
Hey, good to be with you. Although not sure about the history. I think you and I will be lucky to be footnotes, but that's really okay. You know, I'm getting in touch with my inner Marcus Aurelius.
I am too.
Stoic modesty, but here we are. You know, week one of Trump 2.0 after all these years.
Charlie, when they do write the history of this era in 100 years, what's top of line to you? What do you think they'll point out?
You know what? This story hasn't been written yet. Trump 2.0 is not a continuation of Trump 1.0. I will say, I mean, the reality is that this is going to be the Trump era. I mean, you and I, fought against this. I don't want to have to say that. But the last 10 years of American politics are dominated by Donald Trump and this transformation, not just the transformation of the Republican Party, but the transformation of our media universe, of the political universe. And again, how will people look back on it? I am highly skeptical that it will be a golden age. I do think that but there's no question about it. It's going to be it is going to be a pivotal moment in American history. And I'm afraid perhaps a dark one.
Are you surprised that he won this second time?
Well,
and that's a stupidly broad question.
No, I mean, let's step back here and recognize how genuinely shocking it is that the man who tried to overturn the election on January 6th is back in the White House. If you and I were having this conversation on January 7th, 2021, the idea that Donald Trump would ever return to power was absolutely unthinkable. Yeah, and we have no illusions about the Republican Party. We have no illusions about the nature of our politics. And yet, at that moment, and if I'd all then told you that he would be,
Yeah.
indicted on more than 90 counts, that he would in fact be a convicted felon by the election, if we would have seen what the economic numbers were, it would have been unthinkable. So, whether or not we were
Mm.
surprised on November 5th and November 6th, set it aside how genuinely shocking it is in the American political moment. And unfortunately, as I said, this is going to be the era of Trump, and Joe Biden, I think it's gonna I mean, and that's the reality. He's bookended by the 2 Trump terms, and that's the way he's going to remember. He's one of the guys who I think is going to have a very, very small chapter in American history, unfortunately.
Yeah, I was still on the radio on January 6th, and Charlie, you're right. Even for a day or 2 or 3 after that day,
Yeah,
even his most hardcore
right.
base would call into me and say, "Oh, Joe, this is bad." Like, did you think I did that there's a possibility that could have been the end of him?
Yes, no, I did. I did think that it was. I think that a lot of people thought it was. I think that one of the great mistakes that were made by both Joe Biden and by Mitch McConnell, you don't see those names
Yeah,
together much, was that they assumed that, okay, the page had been turned, Trumpism was over, it had taken care of itself. McConnell did not need to go ahead with the impeachment. Biden, when he came into office, did not need to call Merrick Garland in and said, job number one is to hold this man accountable. If we really do believe he's an existential threat to
yeah,
democracy, we have to do that, because no man is a king, no man is above the law. And among the most depressing things that have happened, going to your hashtag,
yeah,
um, the founders did not intend this country to be, a monarchy. They were not intended to have kings. And yet, how many times did we say over the last 4 or 5 years, no one is above the law? And yet, can we say that right now? I mean, this moment where Donald Trump
mm,
proved that he is above the law. He has been immunized by the Supreme Court. The criminal justice system failed to hold him accountable. And with the pardon of the January 6th protesters, he's basically signaling that the law does not apply to me or to people who are in my favor. And I'm sorry, but that's moving us from a nation of laws to something else, which is why I think your hashtag is so timely.
Charlie, maybe an obvious question. Because I think he's just
Yeah.
utterly an idiot, and we don't
Yeah.
talk enough about how stupid Trump is. But do you think he views himself as a king?
I think he views himself as having power that no other president has imagined that he have. I think he has complete contempt for the Constitution. I think that he does believe that the state, that he is the state, as King
Yeah,
Louis XIV said. So whatever he thinks of himself as, he thinks of himself as the strong man who is accountable now to no one.
yeah,
So whatever you want to describe, and also just see who the people he admires the most.
yeah,
He admires Vladimir Putin. He
yeah,
admires President Xi. He admires Viktor Orban. He admires the post-democratic, post-liberal authoritarians and totalitarians of the world. So what does that tell you about Donald Trump? Whatever word you want to apply to him.
That, by the way, everybody, that great radio voice, it'll always be a great radio voice, belongs to Charlie Sykes. Way back in the day, longtime radio
Way back.
guy, original editor-in-chief of the Bulwark. Follow Charlie on Twitter. It'll always be Twitter to me, at Sykes Charlie. Also follow him on Blue Sky, at Sykes Charlie, Blue Sky, bsky.social. Um, Charlie, I want to ask you what your biggest disappointment. I know, again, that's a tough question. Your biggest fundamental disappointment of this era is. I'll start. Mine, and maybe you and I come from different
Yeah.
places. I come from the good old crazy Tea Party populist base. My biggest disappointment of this entire era, Charlie, is all the people who come from that base, who've told me the last 5 to 6 to 7 to 8 years that they want an authoritarian to
Yeah.
get them back this whatever America, but they've actually embraced the notion of a king. That'll always be my biggest disappointment. When you look back at this era right now, what's your biggest disappointment?
Well, I want to go to that point because this is kind of crucial that the people think that well the libertarian conservatives support Donald Trump despite the authoritarianism. No, this is very much what they like about him. When people were saying he's going to be a dictator on day one, you had a lot of these people who had spent their entire lives talking about small government and limited government, going, yeah, no, we want that. They actually get their dopamine hit
Yeah,
out of the use of power and the things that we would regard as disqualifying, the brutality, the cruelty, actually are things that excite them
yeah.
as other authoritarians. So in terms of the disappointment, you know what, Joe,
It's probably impossible to answer.
the last 9 years has been this rolling disappointment. I mean, it's been this soul crushing experience. It has been the invasion of the body snatchers. For the first few
Yeah,
years, it was the disappointment with Republicans and fellow conservatives. And now, as we're sitting here now, you have to just add the roster, just watching civil society bend the knee to this guy. That they just this
why?
premature
Why?
capitulation, fear,
Why, Charlie?
fear
Fear?
and favor. Fear and favor. One of the great things that has been exposed lately is, we might have thought that the billionaires were the ones who were the strongest. They were the ones most insulated from intimidation. It turns out they were the least. They have the most to lose.
Yeah,
So they're truckling for favor. They want things. They want the grift and the graft and the corporate welfare. But there's the fear of people who don't want to antagonize him.
yeah,
And quite frankly, there's some exhaustion out there. So watching the media exhausted capitulate, watching the entire business community, capitulate to him, this is a disappointment. And also, I mean,
yeah,
we can get into the Democrats.
yeah.
I mean, one of my big disappointments was, and continues to be, that Democrats talked a good game about Trump being an existential threat to democracy and our constitutional republic. They sounded the alarm how dangerous this
Yeah,
man was, what the threat that he posed. And yet, once the election was over, it was almost like they went through this normalization process where it's like, okay, we didn't really mean that. I mean, we're still gonna, have him over for tea, and we're gonna still ride in the car with him, and I mean, we're still gonna, go to church. I mean, all of this, it's like, where's the urgency about it? And this is, I think, maybe where you and I, as OG Never Trumpers, are like, look, we have been consistent.
yeah.
We have been talking about the danger that Trump poses. The prime directive of the last 4 years for Joe Biden was protect democracy, hold Trump accountable,
Bingo.
keep Trump from
Yeah.
returning to power. And I think that if you look at it through that lens, as opposed to some Democratic agenda, Joe Biden failed
Oh, God,
to
yeah.
do that
So,
for so many reasons.
so Charlie, why is that? Because everything you just said has infuriated me.
Mhm.
Joe Biden and Barack Obama and Kamala Harris, like you and I, during the campaign said he's an existential threat to
Yeah, yeah,
democracy. Kamala Harris, when asked, is he a fascist, said yes. So
yeah,
boom, 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 they were there with us. And if I were the vice president or the president, and I'm assuming you wouldn't have too, I wouldn't have invited him. He won. You and I accept the result, but I wouldn't have invited him to the White House. I wouldn't have had tea with him. Charlie, I wouldn't have gone to his inauguration. So like, why did they do this?
Well, I think it's the
Did
asymmetry.
they
They
not believe it?
feel they well, no, I mean, I think it's the asymmetry. I think they've told themselves that, okay, that, he behaved in a boorish manner. We need to restore civility. We need to restore these norms. And I understand that logic. And I have to admit that I was torn about that for a
Okay.
little while until Jimmy Carter's funeral,
Yeah.
when they're all yucking it up with Trump, and Trump walks by, and it's Mrs. Pence, Mike Pence's wife,
Yeah.
who like doesn't look at him, doesn't
Yeah.
stand up.
Yeah.
And Mother Pence was not having it. Mother Pence, everybody else was like, okay, we're gonna, be part of this club. And Mother Pence is like, screw that.
And I loved it.
You tried to have my husband killed. You put my family in danger. You have never apologized. I am not going to pretend that did not happen. And I do think that one of the things that Donald Trump is doing now, whether, and again, he's not totally responsible for this, is that he's using the forms and the norms of
Yeah.
democracy to undermine democracy. He's
Yeah.
using the constitutional thing. And so Joe Biden was gracious. Donald Trump did not reciprocate in any
Right.
way whatsoever. So I'm pro civility, but at some point, I can imagine lots of Americans watching this going, okay, so this was just politics, right? When you said these things. This
Right.
was just your kabuki dance. This was like wink, wink, wink. I'm going to say you're a terrible person, and then we're going to go out and have beers together because this is just the way the game is played. It's not a game, and I think that this is where some of us are kind of feeling that we're used to being on the desert island. We're used to being out here screaming into the wind, right, Joe?
I get that.
And
Yeah.
it's like, and so this is
You're
a
right.
familiar feeling for us. People have asked me, like, were you crushed by the election? I say, well, I mean, I've been crushed for a long time. We're kind of used to being out here, but watching this has been disappointing, at least in the initial stages.
Have you, I don't know that I've ever asked you this question. All these years, have you felt politically homeless?
Oh yes, absolutely. There's no question about it. And so I am somewhat comfortable about this.
Okay.
My Substack newsletter to the contrary. I'm going to write an article called Confessions of an Irrelevant Man about how irrelevant we are in America. And essentially what I'm going to say is, and I'm really okay with that because it's also liberating.
Ah,
And we've been on the outside, and you and I both, we know this
yeah.
feeling. And at a certain point, there is something liberating about being irrelevant in the sense that you don't have to hang around with shitty people anymore. You don't have to believe shitty things. You don't have to defend shitty things. You can actually be
Yeah.
more open-minded. You don't have to go through the smorgasbord. And you know what I'm talking about.
Yes.
Smorgasbord
Yes.
line saying, you're a Republican, you got to believe all this stuff. I mean, you
Yes.
watch these members of Congress, they have to believe everything. It's kind of nice to be on the outside and say, you know what? I'm going to decide what I actually think. I'm going to say what I think. And I'm going to say that things are true, even if that's really unpopular, even if it's very, very unfashionable. I'm okay being the one guy who stands in front of the tank. Now I'm going to get rolled over, but at least you took a stand, right?
Do you, because you and I are not 30 years old anymore, we're not 40 years old anymore. Is there a part of you, Charlie, and to build off of that point, the irrelevant man, is there a part of you that no longer wants to fight whatever fight this is, in whatever way you're doing it still?
Oh no, not at all.
Okay.
No. It's just that when I say irrelevant, this is the MAGA
Yeah.
mantra. You know
Yeah.
this, right? It's
Yeah.
like the worst thing in the world is to be irrelevant, which means you don't get invited to the right parties. You don't have to
Bingo.
sit, you don't have to read the talking points. So I think that's bullshit.
Yeah.
No, I think, but in terms of fighting it, part of the commitment is, and I think it was Solzhenitsyn who said, let the lie come into the world. Let everyone believe the lie, but don't let it come through you.
Yeah.
And so there's something. I mean, look, I'm an only child, so this is perhaps a little bit easier for me, is to be an observer and to call what's happening by its proper name. And I think that if we look back on our lives, Joe,
Yeah.
I think that having behaved with integrity and said, okay, you know what? I never went along with the bullshit. I never went along with this. I during the campaign,
Yeah.
I felt I needed to lay it all on the field, burn all the boats.
Yeah.
I endorsed Kamala Harris. Not easy, not
Yeah.
popular, not looking great at the moment. But
Yeah.
you know what? I really want to say at the end of the day that I did everything, I said everything that I needed to do at that particular moment. And again, is it enough? Does it win? No, but this is where we're at, right?
And Charlie, I don't know that I've ever asked you this. Your origin with Trump. Again, it took me a few years to realize what the hell. But you remind me, and remind my listeners right now, right out of the gate, when he came down that escalator or even before, just remind me, when did you say, "No fucking way, no way"? Right at
Oh,
the
there was
beginning, right?
there were there, I mean, it was not a decision. It was no fucking way right from the
Yeah.
beginning, even beforehand. I actually remember being on my radio show in Milwaukee, doing a segment, and maybe was it 2012? Was it 2000? I can't even remember what it was. There was this brief burp of interest in Donald Trump,
Yeah.
and I opened up the phones, and I think the topic was "You cannot be serious," and I was saying how absurd and ridiculous was years before it was
Yeah.
actually a reality. So there was never any moment when I said it was never any moment when I said, no, no way, because it seemed to me self-evident. And the
Yeah.
tragic thing, you talk about disappointment, the tragic thing was, at least in Wisconsin, among my audience, in conservatives in Wisconsin, were battle tested, battle hardened. We'd gone
Yeah.
through a lot. For
Yeah.
people who say, oh, you're a bunch of cucks, you don't know about winning. We won a lot, but these were tough times. And conservatives in Wisconsin did not buy what Trump was selling originally. And
Right.
so when I was anti-Trump on the radio,
You
up
didn't get hammered?
until no, well, not at all. In fact, most people were understood exactly. But watching the transformation of people that I knew understood who Donald Trump was, that was the real disappointment. Watching the invasion of the body snatchers, knowing all these people who did not have a different view than I had of Donald Trump, one by one. And I'm talking about people like Reince Priebus. I'm talking
Yeah.
about the Republican Party in Wisconsin.
Yeah.
Paul Ryan made a different decision. He decided that he was going to cooperate, that he was going to do the Faustian bargain. But that was disappointing to me. And I was also disappointed when people said, "Well, Charlie, you've changed. You've
Yeah.
become." Wait,
Yeah.
no, I'm saying exactly the same thing that I've been saying since 2015. And I'm sitting here watching how you have completely remade yourselves. You
And
know,
in your mind, Charlie Sykes, that complete remaking of themselves was due to fear, as you mentioned, fear and favor.
well, everybody has a different thing. It's part of it is, there's just the gravitational pull of party loyalty, the
Yeah.
tribalism. Once you step out of, I mean, people need to understand, and I don't think people fully understand how intense that is.
Oh,
That when you step outside, you don't just lose your job
nope.
or step away from your job, you lose a whole lifetime of
Yeah.
friendships and contacts and community. And if everybody else is going along with it, you go, do I not want to hang around with these people? And I said,
Yeah.
for me, that wasn't that hard, but I understand. So part of it was just partisan loyalty. We're us versus them. Some people were afraid, some people were favor, whatever.
But again, that needs to be emphasized. And I come, Charlie, from a family of 9, and my father taught me never talk about yourself. So I don't say it a
Yeah.
lot, but people like Charlie Sykes and Joe Walsh and a number of others literally took a blowtorch to their careers to do what they felt was right. And you and I, we don't talk about that enough. But Charlie, you did. You did.
Yeah, no, I mean, and again, it was a remarkably not difficult decision for me because I was never going to go along with this. But I was thinking back at when I left my radio job in 2016. It was December of 2016. Donald Trump had been elected. I had elected voluntarily not to renew my next year of my contract, and the station put on a big shindig. I mean, every Republican in Wisconsin came on the show, and
Yeah.
Scott Walker and Ron Johnson and
Yeah.
all
Yeah.
of these people. We were still friends.
Yeah.
We were still in the same universe. And so at that time, I thought, okay, this is bad,
Yeah.
but we're going to get through this. It's going to be, we still represent something. One by one by one, watching what has become of Ron Johnson,
Yeah.
what has
Oh my
become.
God.
Yeah, well, yeah, exactly. Oh my,
Charlie, Johnson and I got elected together. We became friends. I thought he
I
was
know.
like this sane businessman, just a
Mhm.
sane, practical businessman. Oh
Yeah.
my God, he became radicalized.
I actually had a very close relationship with him. and played a role in his election. And I had the same belief, and I think that he was this guy from Oshkosh
Yeah.
who was. And what I liked about him was when he got to Washington, at least initially, he was like, "I'm not buying into this bullshit. I'm,
Yes.
I'm not going to let
Yes.
my ego get sucked into all of this." And he was from that long Wisconsin tradition of kind of fierce
Yeah.
independence,
Yeah.
but something broke his brain, and to
Yeah.
watch it now
It's
is
just
is
get
like is that how did we get from him there to now? It's really interesting.
and so, before we begin to look forward, I do need to take use my former congressional card and ask you specifically about one person you and I both
Yeah.
know, a guy I served with, a guy when I went to Congress, all of us Tea Party folk kind of idolized Paul Ryan. And then
Mhm.
we got
Yeah.
there and I just grew not to like him. But I'm still pissed off at the way a guy like Paul Ryan has handled this whole Trump thing. What did he do? Why did he do what he's done?
Well, okay, so this has actually been one of the more painful things as well, because I was also very, very
Very
close
close.
to
Yeah.
Paul, and I really like Paul Ryan. Last time I saw him, we did a one-on-one where it was I would say it was somewhat contentious, where I
Yeah.
really sort of held his feet to the fire, not just about Trump, but about being on the Fox board
Yes.
initially. And I talked to him quite a bit, back in 2016 and 2017. And here's somebody who had no illusions who Donald Trump was. You
Yes.
remember in October, right after the Access Hollywood video came
Mhm.
out,
Mhm.
um, do you remember that whole thing? He was supposed to appear with Trump the next day in Racine,
Yes.
Wisconsin,
Yes.
and he canceled it.
Yeah.
Okay, so here is, basically disinviting the nominee of your party, has a conference call the next week telling congressional Republicans, forget him. We're on our own. He had broken with him as decisively as you possibly could have. And yet, as speaker, what happened?
Yeah.
He made the Faustian bargain. He made the deal that, okay, I'll get the tax cuts, I'll get the deregulation, I'll have to eat all these shit sandwiches, but it is worth it. But the problems with Faustian bargains is, as you know, Joe, you get what you want. You get the beautiful women, the gold, the tax cuts, and all that stuff. But then you find out that the price is so much greater, and he had to swallow more and
Yeah.
more and more. He also, I think, rationalized it by saying, okay, I need to be in the room, because if I'm not in the
Yeah.
room,
Yeah.
terrible things will happen. Well, that was an illusion, a delusion, and he's paid a tremendous price. So I mean, he didn't support Trump, and he is, by the way, he didn't support Kamala Harris, but
Right.
he is as excommunicated from Republican politics
As we are.
as either of us.
Yeah.
He didn't. Yeah, I mean, he could say. I know that if he was in this room today, we would have this conversation going. Paul, if only you'd been warned. And he would
Well,
say, "Yeah, you guys were right, but you need to understand." And then he would give the rationalization.
and
He's in
Charlie,
the same spot.
That's the crazy thing. Like, and I know you and I are brothers on this. There's no middle ground with Trump. You either are with him or you oppose him. Nikki Haley and Paul and some of these other folks have tried to
Ironic.
play, and Paul Ryan, who didn't vote for Trump, because you're right. Paul Ryan knows he's unfit, but Paul Ryan then wouldn't take the step that you took and I took and
Yeah.
vote for the only person who can keep Trump out of the White House. Like, do you agree that Nikki Haley and Paul, good people, they have no future in this party, just like we
No,
don't?
see, well, that's the irony, is that they are on the same desert island
Yeah.
that we are. They don't fully realize it. I mean, right up to the end. I mean, how pathetic was Nikki Haley? This
Ah,
pathetic. You know, remember that open mic moment where Chris Christie said, she doesn't have, absolutely. So she figured, okay, I will tiptoe back. I will
yeah,
endorse him. I will do all these things. And Trump basically said, no, I'm going to humiliate her in as many ways as possible. Mike Pompeo,
yeah.
humiliate him in any way whatsoever. You're absolutely right. You're either at, what was the old expression? That you're either at, his throat or at his feet. And, because there is no middle ground.
What okay, so let's I want your 30-second answer on this, and
Yeah.
then we're going to look forward. Um, why did he win? when I go on TV or people ask me that question, I say, because America had a choice between an asshole and this other side that kind of looked down on them. And so regular people picked the asshole. I know it's more nuanced than that, but why did he win, Charlie?
Well, I mean, that is part of it. I mean, I don't want to sane wash the electorate. That looking at Donald Trump and saying, "Yeah, we want to put that guy in." That something hasn't happened to the American political culture. I mean, the
Yeah.
one thing about the 2024 campaign that I wrote about rather extensively was this was Trumpism in full. There were no
Yeah.
illusions.
Yes.
I mean, there was nothing about Trump that was hidden. So everything you're seeing now was what he said. So the
Great
American
point.
people watched him lying. They watched him embracing the most vicious racist conspiracy theories out there. They saw, I mean, they saw everything. And yeah, and that he was a convicted felon. And they voted for him anyway, which tells you something, I think, about not
Yes.
terribly flattering about the American electorate. But having said that, to your point, the Democrats have their own bubble. We
Yeah.
know you and I have dealt with the right wing bubble. The
Yeah.
reality is the Democrats had their own bubble. They had their own bubble about Joe Biden and about his age. They also had a bubble about much of their rhetoric and their priorities that really were completely out of touch with American. And as you probably encountered, they still don't really want to hear it that much.
No.
Now, I want to give you some credit since you've
Mm.
said some nice things earlier. There have been never Trumpers over the last 4 years, and I think that if we went back and I had to write a long obituary, whatever, or autopsy of
Yeah.
why never Trump failed, and let's be honest about it, the failure is pretty
Yeah.
complete. One of the things that happened was that a lot of refugees remade themselves and
Yeah.
decided that if we're never Trump, we're going to embrace all of the progressive agenda.
Oh,
And
boom.
so rather than standing and saying to Democrats, you understand that if you really want to win these elections, you can't take these positions on this
Yeah.
issue. Crime's a legitimate concern. The border's a legitimate concern. Transgender athletes is a legitimate concern. If you don't listen to this, you're going to have problems. But I think there were influential, and I'm trying not to name names here,
Yeah. Yeah.
influential never Trumpers who basically said, no, we're going to go with that whole agenda. And as a result, conservatives stopped listening to them. Now, one of the
Yeah.
things that you did was you kept going at, talking about conservative issues and trying to
Yeah.
talk to conservative, but there was a certain point at which Republican voters, conservatives just tuned Never Trump out because
Yeah.
Never Trump just sounded like another liberal Democratic voice out there. And once they did, I think they shoved themselves, into more irrelevancy than they really
Yeah.
had initially.
My guest is Charlie Sykes. You see him on MSNBC. He puts out pieces in the Atlantic. A longtime political commentator, longtime conservative. Charlie, you're sitting down in a room with the top 2 or 3 or 4 Democratic leaders right now. Give me one piece of cogent advice you would give the Democratic Party right now.
Right now is with Donald Trump, choose your targets, choose them very, very carefully, and then go all out, go all in. It's time to break away from the special interest groups and the identity politics, and focus on where Donald Trump has gone the furthest from his quote unquote popular mandate. It is a target rich environment. Don't simply sit around and tell yourselves that all your priors were correct, that you
Yeah.
are, invariably more virtuous. You're going to have to realize that the world has been fundamentally and permanently changed, and whether or not you're going to compete on that basis. But I think that part of it is, Donald Trump is flooding the zone with outrages.
Yeah.
Don't take the bait on the things that killed you last time. Go after the things that where the voters are, and you know what I'm talking about. I mean,
Yeah.
don't take the bait. Don't take the bait on the border right now. Don't take the bait on transgender athletes,
Yeah.
because there are going to be so many other things that Donald Trump is doing. And I think, for example, the January 6th pardons, this is something that I think is going to hurt him long term.
Yeah.
Would have been nice if Joe Biden hadn't muddied the water with his own
Yes.
pardons, but
Yes.
that's a different subject.
Yes. Charlie, I've often said that we're living in a populist moment.
Yep.
Trump is a demagogue who lies and uses this moment to divide us. But the Democrats have not recognized this kind of
No.
populist moment we're living in.
No, they haven't, because they got away from populism a long time ago. I mean, you probably watched the same thing that I did, was how it became a barbell party,
Yeah.
where
Yeah.
it was
Yeah.
low income and minority groups who had legitimate grievances, and then on the other side you had the college educated elite, and the middle, the working class, the rural whites were ignored by both parties. There was something that was thrown. There was a delayed reaction, in Wisconsin, and I'm sure the case was the same in Illinois. There were counties that Barack Obama won
Yeah.
twice, but
Yeah.
then voted for Donald Trump.
Yeah.
And I don't see them coming back anytime soon unless the Democrats figure out a way to adjust their messaging and their appeal.
Ha- Have you, Charlie, have you ever, and maybe you and I are a little different in this regard. I mean, there will always be a part of me that wants to run for office again, having done it.
You know,
And so there's always a teeny weeny part of me that's thought, everything you just said about the Democratic Party is right. There are only two parties. Forget this idea of a third party right now. Damn it, Joe, become a super conservative Democrat, run as a conservative Democrat. Have you ever thought about formally joining the Democratic Party and trying to move them to the sensible middle?
no, because I'm not a joiner. But when I look back on it, I think this is something that Never Trump should have played a
Ah,
more aggressive role in what is our what is our specific niche in
yeah,
American politics. And it should have been not just rejecting Trumpism, but saying to the one sane remaining political party, you need to become sane, even more sane.
oh, that's
We
great.
should have been a force to say, come to the center. And I think that if you asked me earlier what disappointed me the most, I think what encourages me the most are the number of voices that are being raised in the Democratic Party,
Okay,
saying we need to break away from the special interest groups. We need to get
yeah,
away from the identity politics. We need to stop, talking like we're sitting in the faculty lounge in Burlington, Vermont, or Berkeley, California, or Madison, Wisconsin. I hope that seeps into the green rooms of MSNBC as well.
yeah,
But I do think that that's a role that we should have played more aggressively. Um, I think it was a mistake for some of the NeverTrumpers to become Biden fanboys,
yes.
when the role should have been, no, we need to be the critics explaining that you shouldn't go this way. And maybe that will be the role going forward, to the extent that anybody pays any attention to what we say at all.
Charlie, if a Joe Walsh or an Adam Kinzinger or a Liz Cheney came out Monday and said, "I'm a Democrat, I'm a super conservative Democrat," would the Democratic Party accept any of us?
No,
I
no.
think you're right. I think you're right.
I No.
That's interesting.
It is interesting how, no, I don't think so, because then you'd have to put specifics to that, and you'd have to take
Yeah,
positions that,
yeah.
and William F. Buckley Jr. once had a very funny comment that sticks with me, and he says that, um now I don't remember the exact quote, but it's something like, that liberals, are always, say that they're respectful of other points of view, and then are surprised to find out there are other points of view. That they're like, well, wait, you're anti-Trump. I thought that meant that you were in
Yeah,
favor of
yeah,
every
yeah, yeah,
spending program, every social agenda out there, no. And once they hear
yeah.
that, you know,
So what
and I
so
think, and I think part of it is that I
huh,
think our politics, unfortunately,
yeah.
because we have been struggling to say that there's a centrist beating heart,
Yes.
center right, center left.
Yeah.
I think our politics is going to become more polarized, more radicalized. And
So that's fascinating, Charlie
yeah,
Sykes. So do you think there would be, with sufficient money, is there room for that common sense centrist party? Now, maybe not.
I don't. Well, no, and I don't know. I do think that if the Democrats are going to come back, they're going to have to come back as more centrist, or as more overtly populist
Yes.
than they have been. And by the way, there's an opportunity here. I mean,
What?
Donald Trump is serving them up.
Yeah.
Basically becoming the billionaire oligarchy. The
Yes.
fact that at his inauguration, in the front row, you had all of the tech billionaires. They were in row number one.
Yeah.
The cabinet was in row number two. There's something sort of
Yes.
unsustainable and absurd about a populist movement dominated by people who are, have fuck you money,
Amen.
and who are going to aggressively and crudely flaunt their power and their wealth over the next few years. So if somebody could bottle that up, that kind of populism, and I think it is potent. Now I'm
Wh-
going to contradict myself
What?
completely.
What?
And because I was talking to a guy about this yesterday, and I realized that we were saying the same thing, and then it made no sense. Which is that one of the guys that actually has been calling out the bullshit in a very,
Yeah.
very effective way is Mark Cuban, a
Yes.
personality who breaks through, who's on the
Yeah.
outside, who's a real billionaire. So I'm not sure how you
Yeah.
square the circle of running against billionaires and saying, yeah, but maybe our white knight is a
Yeah.
billionaire.
Yeah.
So this is why I'm
That's a
not a political consultant.
that's a great thought. I'm sure since the election, you, like me, have been bombarded with messages from supporters and followers who are feeling hopeless, despondent.
Yeah.
They want to check out. They want to give up. I'm
Yeah.
done. Ba 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 ba. Um, Charlie, what do we do now if when some of these people ask you or me, what do we do? How do we resist? He owns both branches of government. He owns. What can we do? What does that look like? Like broadly speaking, the resistance. But what do those of us who oppose authoritarianism, oppose what this thing is? What do we do now?
You know what? I think at this point, you just take a deep breath, remind yourself that you are not the crazy ones, and realize that this too shall pass. I think that right now we're standing on the beach and the tsunami has just hit us. And so, I do understand why people haven't really figured out what their strategy for next week is. But I think there is a deep breath. I also, I fully understand the people who want to be disconnected. I mean,
Yes.
I feel you don't want to watch cable television. You don't want to immerse yourself in all of this. You don't know who to believe anymore.
Yes.
And I think that is very, very real. I will say that I think that there is a moment of real realignment in the media. And I'm not saying this to be
Yeah.
self-serving here, but I thought that after, I'm trying to get my Substack news that I'm going to bring back a podcast. I thought after the election, oh man, we're all going to be dead because nobody's going to want to read this.
Right.
The growth has been explosive.
Yeah.
And I think it's because people now are looking for trusted voices. I think the
Yes.
media landscape, which had been transformed before the election, is really being transformed. So I think that what people need to do is, first of all, understand you can't back out, you can't check out, because you have to get the politics right for any civilization. We just can't
Yeah.
ignore it. And this is what authoritarians want.
Yes.
They
Oh,
want to
emphasize
grind you
that,
down.
Charlie. Emphasize
They
that. Yeah.
This is what they want. They flood the zone in order to make you feel it's hopeless. Don't do that. So I think that part of it is figure out what's important to you. Try to preserve your sanity.
Yeah.
I think it's not a bad thing that people are not setting their hair on fire and running around, because right now, let's let it play out, because I think the principles and the verities that we think are important are still important. And Donald Trump is going to do what almost every, okay, now I was going to say almost every other president. Look, every president, and you know this, Joe,
Yeah.
every president, misreads their mandate. Political
Yes.
parties come into power and they overreach. They go too far. This administration, this Republican Party, is dripping with hubris, dripping with overweening pride. They are going to push it too far. And at that point, I think, that the world 4 years from now, I think, is going to look very different than it looks right now. We just have to have the faith in that.
And
The
I
faith
think,
that the churn.
well, you're right, Charlie. And I think of the word bravery, which is a word I use a lot. And I think of the latest piece, I think in your Substack, charliesykes.substack.com. Go check out the piece.
To the contrary.
You like talk about, help me if I'm wrong. I've been putting examples of people who have been brave right now, but you talk about looking for a hero who's going to
Right.
stand up to this. Explain that.
Well, we don't know yet who is going to, and I had the picture from Tiananmen Square
Yeah,
of the
yeah,
one lone man standing in front of the
yeah.
thing, and it's just a reminder: one person, one hero, can may get crushed by the tank, but can inspire the world and become a symbol. We don't know what that story is going to be. That at some point someone's going to stand up, and I thought, I'm not sure that the bishop of Washington was the hero we were waiting for, but it
What?
was interesting,
Yeah,
soft spoken
yeah.
Christian woman, talks about mercy
And
and the
compassion.
reaction of
Yeah,
MAGA, compassion.
yeah.
But I thought it was interesting that Donald Trump, and I quote somebody as saying was like he'd been scalded with holy water or something. It's like, oh my God, you know, we have these MAGA snowflakes who right
Yeah,
now look
yeah.
all full of bravado and bravery. But one of the things we're also finding out is that they are really, thin-skinned, man children.
Amen.
And so
Amen.
there may come people may feel discouraged and despondent right now, but at some point, and I don't know who it's going to be, but there will be stories and someone will take a stand. And
I
I
love
think
that.
and I think this is something else Democrats have to realize. They need to tell stories.
Oh,
Don't
man.
lecture us.
Preach, Charlie.
I mean,
Yes.
they need to tell the stories. They need to humanize it. I don't want to see another white paper. I don't want to see another
Yes.
chart. Don't give me your typical fucking jargon
Bingo.
word salads.
Preach,
Tell
preach,
me the
preach.
story of this person who
Yeah.
is affected.
Amen.
Humanize when they humanize it. I think, and there will be stories that
Yeah.
are going to come out of Donald Trump. Now, Trump is not bad at being a storyteller. And
Yes.
if there's one thing in his reptilian instinct, he knows how to do, even if it's a lie, even if it's fabricated, he knows how to do this. Democrats, I'm not saying the lies,
No,
but we
they
need
just
to
don't
know
do
the
it.
names. I mean, look, we need to know the names, we need to know the faces of this. I think the Democrats this week should have been out talking about the names of the January 6th rioters, what they did to cops. I think that they should have told that story. I think they need to be very careful and selective of the stories they tell, but there are going to be stories.
Well, and Charlie, I'll give you a story that happened yesterday, a targeted ICE raid in Newark, New Jersey,
Yep.
and a United States military veteran was caught up in the heist, was apprehended. As you say, put a name and a face. One of our own was
Yep.
apprehended yesterday.
Well, and Fox News is great at this. They will take someone, an illegal immigrant who commits a crime, a murder,
Yeah,
and they will tell
yeah.
that story over and over and over again until you begin to think we're being overrun by rapist murderers, illegal
And
immigrants. We need to tell the other stories too.
and
The grandma who
yes.
is rolled over and deported while her screaming kids
It's
are
happening.
out
It's
there.
happening.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, and Charlie, you're right. Look, in my former right-wing radio days, I used to be very good putting that
I know,
face of that. Hey,
I know.
two final questions, Charlie. One specific, one broad. The future of the Never Trump movement. Is there one? What does it look like?
I don't know. I honestly don't. I honestly don't know. Obviously, there's a certain infrastructure there, but I think that. I mean, I think that the individual voices need to keep speaking out. I just think it's the ideas and the voice and the standing. You talk about the bravery. I don't know whether you and I are both going to be at this event next month in
Yes.
Washington, the
Yes.
Principals First Conference, which is
Yes.
a wonderful group of people because
Yes.
it's not a grifty thing.
No.
It's just people who are reminding themselves that they are not alone in all of this.
Yeah.
That they're not the crazy ones. And it really it remains bipartisan and
Yeah.
ideologically fluid. And I think that's that there's a place for that, but
Yeah.
the Never Trump movement, I mean, what is it just going to continue to be a fundraising organization? Is it going to continue to, be a platform for certain egos? I
Eh,
don't know.
exactly, exactly. Enough there. My final question to you, one of my American heroes. I'm a tad younger than you. I'm probably darker than you. I worry about. I think our democracy at best is teetering right now. I want to ask you, Charlie Sykes, this
Mm.
question. This 249-year-old experiment in freedom and democracy. Are you bullish or bearish on it?
Well, I never want to give up hope,
Mhm.
but I'm not optimistic. And optimism and hope are not the same
Uh,
thing. And optimism is the belief that things are going to get better. Hope is the belief that if you
yeah.
fight and work hard, that you might get things better. But I do feel that we are at a point, and it does feel. I actually do share your concern that that the experiment is running out of gas.
Yes.
That
Yes.
and in part because I think the Constitution was a remarkably brilliant document that has gotten us through all of this. But the Constitution also believed that there would be an informed electorate and there would be
Oh,
honest and
man.
honorable people. It was basically built on the honor system.
Thank
And
you.
so for just take the
Yes.
the grant of the unlimited pardon power to the president, what it actually means. So again, I love the Constitution. I'm a reader of the Federalist Papers,
Yeah.
but they did not envision the world that we have now, and that worries me. Look, all democracies, all republics, eventually find ways to implode upon themselves. This is
Yes.
one of the great lessons of history. This is what they knew.
Yes.
They knew that unless certain virtues, unless certain principles were present, that the democracy would not survive. They got just a great 250-year run, but it was never guaranteed forever, was it?
No, no. And Charlie Sykes, I love what you just said. So I will paraphrase without an informed populace, it ain't going to succeed. It will not continue. That's on us. My guest today, Charlie Sykes, everybody. You see him on MSNBC, you see him on The Atlantic. Check out his Substack page. Follow him on X or Twitter at Sykes Charlie. Follow him on Blue Sky at Sykes Charlie. Listen to him, read him, follow him. Did I hear you say you're going to launch a podcast? Did I hear
Yeah,
that?
after February 9th,
Boom.
we're gonna do it for the podcast video. I'm gonna learn from you guys. I'm gonna try to do something that is half as good as what you've been doing,
Do better. And
because
I
I've been
will
chomping at the bit,
I
to
will
talk
well,
about it
I'm
again.
glad you've been chomping at the bit, and I will promote the shit out of it because everybody should listen to and read everything you put out there. You're a great I was about to say, as Rush Limbaugh always would say, oops, Charlie Sykes, you are a great American. Thank you, everybody, for
You too,
listening.
Joe.
Be brave.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening. Remember to listen, share, and follow The Social Contract with Joe Walsh on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and everywhere great podcasts are found. And be sure to leave a 5-star review. This has been The Social Contract.